It was July 27th, 1956. 2 days since the final Martin and Lewis show. 2 days since Jerry had told Dean it was over. 2 days since Hollywood had started writing Dean's obituary. Dean dialed a number. The phone rang. "Hello?" "Frank," Dean said. "It's Dino. I need your help." Frank Sinatra listened as Dean Martin explained his situation. The partnership was over. Jerry had kicked him out. Everyone was saying Dean would fail as a solo act. "What do you need?" Frank asked. "I need you to introduce me to your movie people. Not for comedy, for serious roles. I'm done being the funny guy's straight man." There was a pause on the line. Then Frank Sinatra said something that would change Dean Martin's life. "Come to my place tomorrow. I'll make some calls." That conversation launched one of the greatest comebacks in entertainment history. Because Dean Martin didn't just survive without Jerry Lewis. He became bigger than Jerry Lewis, more successful, more beloved, more legendary. All because of a phone call he made 48 hours after being kicked out. To understand what Dean Martin accomplished, you have to understand what he lost when Jerry Lewis ended their partnership. Martin and Lewis weren't just a comedy duo, they were the biggest entertainment act in America. From 1946 to 1956, they dominated everything. Nightclubs, radio, television, movies. At their peak, they were making more money than almost any other performers in the country. Dean Martin was the straight man, handsome, smooth. He sang romantic ballads and played the sophisticated Italian crooner. Jerry Lewis was the clown, manic, physical, completely uninhibited. Together, they created something magical. They made 16 films together. Every single one made money. They had a radio show that millions listened to every week. They appeared on television and ratings went through the roof. When they performed at nightclubs, the shows sold out weeks in advance. But by 1956, the partnership had become toxic. Dean felt like he was just there to set up Jerry's jokes. Jerry felt like Dean wasn't taking the act seriously enough. There were fights about money, about billing, about who got more attention from the press. On July 25, 1956, they performed their final show together at the Copacabana in New York City. When it was over, they walked off stage in opposite directions and didn't speak. Backstage, Jerry told Dean, "I can't do this anymore. It's over." Dean didn't argue. He just left. The next morning, the headlines were brutal. Martin and Lewis split after 10 years. And underneath, every single article said the same thing. Dean Martin would never make it alone.
The Hollywood Reporter wrote, "Jerry Lewis is the talent. Dean Martin is just the good-looking guy who stands there. Give him 6 months and he'll be forgotten." Variety predicted, "Martin will be back in nightclubs singing to half-empty rooms within a year." A prominent executive at Paramount Pictures told anyone who would listen, "Dean made a huge mistake. He should have done whatever it took to keep the partnership together. He'll never have another hit." Even Dean's friends were worried. One told him, "Maybe you should reach out to Jerry, see if you can work things out." Dean refused. "It's over," he said. "I'm moving forward." But moving forward to what? Dean's first solo project was a romantic comedy called 10,000 Bedrooms. It came out in March 1957. The reviews were terrible. The box office was worse. It was a complete flop. The headlines were vicious. "Dean Martin bombs without Jerry Lewis." "We told you so. Martin can't carry a film alone." "Is Dean Martin's career over?" That's when most people would have panicked. That's when most people would have called Jerry begging to reunite. But Dean Martin wasn't most people. Because 48 hours after Jerry ended the partnership, Dean had made that phone call to Frank Sinatra, and Frank had given him advice that would change everything. "Don't try to replace Jerry," Frank had said. "Don't do more comedy. Don't find another partner. Do the opposite. Reinvent yourself completely. Stop being the straight man. Start being Dean Martin. What does that mean? Dean asked. It means stop trying to be funny, Frank explained. You're not Jerry. You'll never be Jerry. But you know what you are? You're cool. You're sophisticated. You've got this effortless charm. Lean into that. Do serious films, dramatic roles. Show people you're an actor, not just a comedian sidekick. Frank made good on his promise. He introduced Dean to powerful directors and producers. He vouched for Dean's acting ability. He used his considerable influence to get Dean's serious roles.
In 1958, Dean Martin was cast in The Young Lions, a World War II drama starring Marlon Brando and Montgomery Clift. These were serious actors, method actors. This wasn't comedy. This was capital A acting. Dean was nervous. He'd never done anything like this before. On set, Marlon Brando was intense, completely immersed in his character. Montgomery Clift was brilliant and complicated, and Dean was just trying to prove he belonged. But something interesting happened. Dean's natural charisma translated perfectly to dramatic work. His understated style, which had seemed simple in comedy, looked like sophisticated acting in drama. He didn't overdo it. He didn't try too hard. He just was. The reviews for The Young Lions were strong, and for the first time, critics mentioned Dean Martin as a legitimate actor, not as Jerry Lewis's former partner, not as a failed comedian, as an actor. That same year, 1958, Dean also appeared in Some Came Running with Frank Sinatra and Shirley MacLaine. Again, it was a serious dramatic role. Again, the reviews were good. Dean was proving that Frank's advice had been right. He didn't need to be funny. He just needed to be Dean Martin. But Dean wasn't just focused on movies. He was also pursuing his music career. While he'd been with Jerry, Dean had been primarily known as the singer in the comedy duo. But now, as a solo artist, he could really showcase his voice. In 1953, Dean had recorded That's Amore, which became a huge hit. In 1955, Memories Are Made of This went to #1. And in 1958, Dean recorded Volere, which became another massive success. Dean Martin was becoming a legitimate recording artist, not a comedian who could sing, an actual singer. Then came 1959, and everything changed completely. Dean was cast in Rio Bravo, a Western directed by Howard Hawks and starring John Wayne. This was a big deal. John Wayne was one of the biggest movie stars in the world, and Wayne had personally requested Dean Martin for the role. When asked why he wanted Dean, Wayne said, because he's good, and he's cool, and he doesn't try too hard. That's exactly what this role needs. Rio Bravo was a massive success, both critically and commercially. And Dean Martin's performance was praised as one of the best parts of the film. He played a drunk former deputy trying to redeem himself. It was dramatic, it was complicated, it was nothing like anything he'd done with Jerry Lewis. After Rio Bravo, Dean Martin was no longer Jerry Lewis's former partner. He was a movie star. By the early 1960s, Dean had joined Frank Sinatra's Rat Pack. Along with Sammy Davis Jr., Peter Lawford, and Joey Bishop, Dean became part of the coolest group in entertainment. They performed together in Las Vegas. They made movies together. They became legends together. Dean's persona as the king of cool was fully formed now. The guy with a drink in his hand who made everything look effortless. The sophisticated Italian crooner who could act, sing, and charm anyone.
In 1964, Dean accomplished something that shocked the entire music industry. His song Everybody Loves Somebody knocked the Beatles' A Hard Day's Night off the #1 spot on the Billboard charts. The Beatles, at the height of Beatlemania. Dean Martin beat them. Then, in 1965, Dean launched The Dean Martin Show on NBC. It ran for 9 years and was consistently one of the highest-rated shows on television. Dean won a Golden Globe. He became one of the most beloved entertainers in America.
The show was built around Dean's personality, relaxed, funny without trying too hard, musical, sophisticated. It was the opposite of Jerry Lewis's manic energy, and America loved it. Meanwhile, Jerry Lewis was also successful. He made hit movies as a director and star. He had his own television specials. He hosted the muscular dystrophy telethon every year. Jerry was talented and accomplished. But here's the thing. Dean Martin became bigger. Dean's movies made more money. Dean's television show had higher ratings. Dean's music sold more albums. Dean became a cultural icon in a way that Jerry never quite achieved. And the beautiful irony is that Dean accomplished all of this by doing exactly what Frank Sinatra told him to do 48 hours after the split. Stop trying to be Jerry Lewis's partner. Start being Dean Martin. Years later, in interviews, Dean was asked about the split with Jerry. He never spoke badly about his former partner. He'd just say things like, "Jerry's a talented guy. We had a great run, but it was time to move on." When asked if he had any regrets, Dean said, "None. Breaking up with Jerry was the best thing that ever happened to my career. I got to become who I actually was instead of who people expected me to be." In 1976, 20 years after the split, Frank Sinatra orchestrated a surprise reunion between Dean and Jerry on Jerry's muscular dystrophy telethon. When Dean walked onto that stage and saw Jerry for the first time in 2 decades, both men cried. They hugged, they made jokes, they remembered the good times. And the audience went crazy. The phone lines at the telethon exploded with donations. It was one of the most emotional moments in television history. But that reunion happened on Dean's terms. He wasn't crawling back to Jerry. He wasn't desperate. He was the king of cool, a member of the Rat Pack, a television icon, a recording star, a movie legend. He was everything Hollywood said he'd never be without Jerry Lewis. Jerry later said about that reunion, "Seeing Dean again reminded me what a star he'd become. He didn't need me. He never needed me. I just didn't realize it at the time." The story of Dean Martin's comeback is important because it's not just about success, it's about reinvention. It's about refusing to be defined by other people's expectations. When Jerry Lewis ended their partnership, everyone expected Dean to fail, or to beg to come back, or to spend his career trying to recreate what Martin and Lewis had been.
Dean did none of those things. Instead, 48 hours after being kicked out, he picked up a phone. He asked for help. He listened to advice. And then he completely reinvented himself. He stopped trying to be a comedian. He became an actor. He stopped trying to be funny. He became cool. He stopped being Jerry Lewis's straight man. He became Dean Martin. And in doing so, he created a legacy that outlasted Martin and Lewis. He became more than half of a comedy duo. He became an icon. When Dean Martin died on Christmas Day, 1995, the obituaries didn't lead with "former Martin and Lewis star dies." They led with "Dean Martin, king of cool, dies at 78. That's how completely he'd reinvented himself. The lesson of Dean Martin isn't that you should end partnerships or that success is about being better than your former collaborators. The lesson is simpler. When the thing you've been doing ends, you have a choice. You can try to recreate it, or you can become something new. Dean Martin chose to become something new, and it made him a legend. All because 48 hours after Jerry Lewis kicked him out, Dean Martin picked up a phone, called Frank Sinatra, and said, "I need your help." That phone call changed everything, not just for Dean Martin, but for everyone who's ever been told they can't succeed alone, for everyone who's ever lost a partnership and wondered what comes next, for everyone who's ever had to reinvent themselves after everything fell apart. Dean Martin proved it's possible, not just to survive, but to thrive, to become bigger, to become better, to become legendary.
Jerry Lewis kicked Dean Martin out of their partnership in 1956. By 1965, Dean Martin was the king of cool, and Jerry was just the guy who'd made the biggest mistake of his career. If this story of reinvention, resilience, and refusing to accept other people's limitations moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with anyone who's going through a breakup, a career change, or a moment where they're being told they can't succeed alone. Leave a comment telling us about a time you had to reinvent yourself. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more incredible true stories about the legends who proved everyone wrong.